work on this old Strega here. This is going to be tape 14 of the Strega series. This is how we left him drying, and it's about time to get into the meat and potatoes of sanding this glass. Other things that we're going to try to do on this video: finish the fillets, the fillet around the canopy, and some more work over on that flaps, the little touch-up on the wing. Actually, we're going to try to get him ready. This is what this is all about: get him ready and as close to being ready to put in silver as possible. Now this is a secret, I can't tell anybody. Debbie and Peggy, don't tell anybody. This is Karen's Christmas present. This is a real cameo. It's 100 years old. This is a secret present I got for her. Secret. Look at the detail on this. Talk about craftsmanship and workmanship. Look at the face, all the carvings. Whoops. Carvings up here. But I bet she's really going to like it. Anyway, why do I even mention that? Because it's Christmas time. Christmas here in the Ertnowski household. Anyway, don't tell Karen. That's going to be her Christmas. Now today, this is only drying one day, so it might not be, it might be a little bit too much work sanding this. Usually you can tell when your glass is dry by how brittle it gets. So when the outer edges get brittle, you know this is ready to sand. And obviously we'll give this a little try. I'll take a brand new X-Acto knife and just trim out right along the plywood edges. Now this is what's nice about having plywood edges. Now, a couple of tips for sanding glass. A couple of the things you can do wrong. One of the things you can do wrong is make it too smooth. If it's too smooth, the paint doesn't really want to stick. This is why a lot of people have trouble with where they glass the center of the wing, or any place actually, the nose even, where they glass a cowl or whatever with paint sticking. And then they try to resort to things like putting aerogloss and nitrate and things on, which cause problems further down the road. Best way is just leave the surface. If we sand this with either 220 or the minimum 320, but leave it a little bit scuffy. Leave it a little bit rough. Just a little bit rough. You're going to get a better tooth. The paint gets a better tooth on it. If you sand it perfectly smooth, you don't get a tooth. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll do this off camera. Get all the extra, first step, get all the extra glass trimmed off piece by piece. Now this is the places where these rubber blocks really come in handy. You really can make some nice cuts here. Now you see the way this is powdering off? This is telling you, yeah, it's not a problem. This is dry enough, even though this would be easier if I let it dry another day. Now I also want to get all the edges radius. See right here, here's where you get that nice radius in there. If you were just sanding this by hand, this would really be a not so cut and dry proposition. Okay, I guess we got that pretty well sanded in, rough enough anyway. I'm leaving it a little bit rough, like I just said. And now, we'll go work on the nose. Now the last thing I always do, the last thing after all the block work is done, get all these blocks out of here. Take some nice 320, 220, whatever, and by hand, sand the whole thing by hand. Now what we're going to do is we're going to rough out the fuselage, and then the last thing, bolt the cowling in place and get all the lines and edges nice and true. They should be close. But the last thing, when you're done block sanding, the last thing, take the sandpaper on the end of your fingers and just scuff it up. This way, any low spots that are still in here, you're going to get a little bit of just a little bit of scuffing on it. And of course, all the edges. All of the edges. If you miss the edges, you're going to have trouble holding the paint on the edges, and a year later it'll crack, fuel gets in, and it's a mess. Always radius the edges. Just get a little look at how this is candled out. Candling it is always a good idea too. Just hold it up against the light. And that last little sanding by hand should get everything just lightly scuffed up. You can even do it by hand, feel it by hand. That old glass has been drying over there. Get that over here and we'll just start the same, pretty much the same thing we did on the cowl. Trim off all the edges and start block sanding it in. Now talk about inspiration. I always like to get inspiration while I'm working on these things. This is a picture Walt Prey just sent me. And he's working on some stencils or some ideas for lettering Strega up. Look at the nose section. Is that ever a work of art or what? Unbelievable. Beautiful. Now the first step, and needless to say, is get the razor out, trim this out. I'm glad we trimmed this ahead of time, because what it did, it kept a lot of epoxy from drooling in there that we normally would have to sand out. And I guess what we'll do is trim this out and just start on the bottom first and work our way up to the top. Now just a question of just patiently block sanding out, candling, block sanding out, radius in all the edges. All the glass cloth seems to come right off the edges. Use of the sanding blocks right now. And we want to get a nice blend from where the glass goes into the raw wood. Alright, I got most of this sanded out. Now what I've been trying to do is work on this scoop area from the inside, because I don't want to take the little piece with the sandpaper on it and keep banging into the wing. I still want to get all the edges inside the cowl. There's still quite a bit of sanding to do here, but needless to say, about 2 hours of this and I'm burned out. So I'm going to go have a cup of coffee, come back and work on this later. Boy, there's nothing like a good cup of coffee to wake you up in the morning. Anyway, one of the things I had to devise, and I did a little experimenting on this, I took some of the sticky back paper and used it on a machinist ruler to get inside that cowling area. And that's an area that's really a pain in the ass to work on. Now another thing, where the heck did I put it? Well, I'm glad I know what I'm doing. Another thing I wound up doing, I took a long piece of balsa like this. I've been wrapping thin sheets of sandpaper. What I did, just press this down. Let me get this on. This is that sticky back paper, 150. And then I trim these both edges off with an X-Acto, and I can get in the bottom edges of the cowl. Now, making up these tools is the whole secret to getting this nose sanded out. To get in these areas, it's really it's impossible without something like this. Now, to get into that area there, it's like an impossible thing if you put sandpaper on the end of your finger. But if you work it through the front, let's see if we can get down in there. You can get the tool right in here and get all the edges and corners and everything just fantastic. So I hope you can use that for one little trick. Anyway, I'm going to spend about another hour here, and that's going to be the end of this session. This took a lot longer than I thought it would. You can see how nice this lets you get the corner here. Anyway, I hope if nothing else you pick up some ideas for making your own little sanding tools. And of course the best thing is when you feel confident enough to improvise, you'll figure out things that, now I can turn it over and get the top edge. But nothing looks worse than on a typical Pattern Master or any plane that uses this type of air outlet. Inside the scoops, when it doesn't look real nice, boy, can't say I like that. Oop, I just broke it. Oh, that's okay. I can just CA this together. Well, it's still long enough that I can get in there. But another thing you could use here would be nice, I don't have any, is some hardwood. If you had a thin strip of hardwood, like spruce or something, it would work good. Now, see, with those edges done, now I can get in there with the machinist ruler, and I can get a nice flat, because again, I want inside the scoops to look real nice too. I don't want to have these things look like 80 grit sandpaper or something in here. Now, I just wanted to mention one thing here. I'm having another, I put the coffee down, having another cup of coffee. What's happened here is, well, what's happened is the phone's rung. Boy, the point I was trying to make, and I guess this phone ringing off the hook here, the whole point of this whole deal is, this is the kind of work, and boy, I've said this over and over, but if you learn nothing else from this, you can't do this work like it's slavery. Now, I do this, we got about 4 hours into this today, and I'm not finished. I have more to do, but a break now and then, a coffee break, walk outside, take the dog for a walk. If you don't have a dog, I don't know, buy a dog. The whole idea here is you got to do this work while you're really fussy and really careful. You can't just grind away at it like it's you know, shoveling a pile of camel flop or something. And right now I've kind of lost the edge. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little break here. And I know people have asked me, I know several people said, oh, I get tired of sanding. Oh, that's why I don't sand it out as much as I should. I get tired of sanding it too, and I'm sure Ted Fancher does, and Busso and everybody, anybody that's a fussy builder. But that's a lesson you really could pick up from the video and you could learn. It takes time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of sandpaper. To have one of these things really look perfect, really look nice, get a 20-point award or a front row or something or whatever, it doesn't come easy. And right now, I have that old feeling like, I did this for roughly 4 hours today. My work will improve if I take a half-hour break and do something else. So I'm going to go. I have some errands to run. Maybe come back and maybe finish this afternoon. But if I'm not in the mood, I'm not going to do it. And that's something, you're not going to read that in a magazine. You can't. Nobody wants to admit that, oh, I get tired or I'm bored or whatever. Midgley told me the other day he just couldn't go down in a shop. He just had enough. I know that feeling. Gary Lutz called me this morning that he crashed his PM during the year, and what inspired me was he's going to write a little thing for Stunt News on how he used the crash videos to fix it. He's building a new PM, and he said part of the thing that really helped was Billy Suarez sent him the trophy that he won the day he crashed the plane, the Beauty Award. We voted him for the Beauty Award at Edison. And what it did for me, it inspired me just a little bit. So I know I have a couple hours left. Tonight I'll come back here, or this afternoon, And I'll try to finish the sanding of the body because I still have to do the fillets, I still have to do the canopy area. But you just can't do it when you're burned out. And that's the lesson of the day. I only have about maybe an hour tonight. So what I wanted to do, I did a little more sanding on this off camera. What I wanted to do is make note of a nice little trick that I've been using. What happens is the glass cloth ends about here, and usually you have a little hump, and you never can get that edge out. Now what I've done is I've gone back maybe this far to the high point of the wing and just run some thin CA on here and wipe it with a paper towel. So now this is rough and has to be sanded in, but now I can sand into the hardened wood and I get a nicer blend from where the cloth ends to where the wood begins. And that is a really good tip. So everywhere that cloth ends on the top and on the side here, I've hardened it up with the thin CA. Also been able to use this to good advantage in here where we've CA'd this. That looks like it's going to work out real well. And now I'm going to try to, you can see the CA ends here. I'm going to try to get a blend. So we go from cloth right into smooth wood without having that edge that we have to work on. Now what I've accomplished is where the glass has ended and where we've gone into the wood that's been hardened up with CA, and by the way that will strengthen it a little bit. And now back here, right here, you can see now we're into raw wood. We have a beautiful transition on this side. That should be just perfect. Just a perfect transition. And of course I'll work on this side, pretty much the same thing. Just get that transition from glass to CA to raw wood. That's, I guess, of all the things that are difficult to do, it's hard to get a hard thing to blend into a soft thing. Hard wood, this wood has been glassed into the soft wood. During this session, I've been watching this. Richard Neal sent me this great tape. Has all real train footage on it, and boy, very inspirational. Very inspirational. He knows I love trains. Anyway, it's helpful if you can watch something that's enjoyable while you're doing this. Now the last step, of course, is to get the cowling on and get that final blend. Get the final blend of everything. You really want to blow the judge's mind. They can't tell where the cowling joint is. I'm going to try, I got a little time left today. I'm going to work on the bottom of the stab and save the wing fillet for tomorrow. This has really taken a long time. I can't believe it. You know, even longer than I expected. There's still a bad spot now. I can't believe it. I've been working on this bad spot for a half an hour in here. You just got to run your hand over it and just constantly find the little spots you're not happy with. Now I'm pretty much going to do to the bottom of the stab what I've already done on the top here. Kind of a redundant thing. I won't bother videoing too much, other than to say, really, this is a part of the plane I want to really spend some time on, getting that contour from the top block in here. That's usually where you grab the plane. And once I get it final sanded in, I'll harden up the wood with thin CA, so that those among us who must wear rings when they launch the plane, maybe we'll have a fighting chance of not having any ring marks in here. Again, you may want or need to make some special sanding tools up for this. If you do, I think just picking that up off the video is worth the price of admission. Now this one side blended in real nice. Was a little bit of a job getting that. I had to put about 10 layers of CA in there to get that fit just the way I wanted it. And what I did, I ran some thin CA up the back of the stab, the tail post, just to harden it up so I wouldn't be gouging into it as I'm working on the fillets. And what I'll do, I'll work on the other side off camera. Try to finish this up tonight, and tomorrow we'll try to attack the wing. The wing is on our list, the canopy fillet, wing fillets. The cowling is blended in just about as good as it's going to be, and then we can start doping up, hopefully doping up the fuselage. This has just been one heck of a day of sanding. I have to tell you, I'm really bored with all this sanding. Anyway, I did get a lot done. This is really the bottom line. I got the back of this stab, the elevators. Let's hope they're one sanding away from ready for some dope and tissue. And tomorrow we'll hopefully get in here, do the canopy fillet and do the wing fillet. Get that ready. Really looking forward to it. It's been a long day, believe me. Hey, that video that Richard Neal sent in, I have to tell you, I love this. Anything to do with steam engines. Unbelievable. That made it all possible. Rich, thanks a lot. Appreciate it a whole lot. By the way, that video, that's a Skyfire video. That's made by the same people that make the Reno Air Race videos. So if you like trains, pick up a Skyfire video or give Richard Neal a call. Really like it. Now today, as I always believe in doing, work on the bottom first, develop a little technique. So what I'm going to do is try to sand out this bottom fillet, and one of the key things here is I want to get this a nice even point, of course. I also want to have it flat 90 degrees this way, 90 degrees this way, so I'm making up a bunch of little sanding blocks. You can see all the different shapes I've tried. I've done a little sanding here, and the main thing is I want to get the blend from here to here. I'm going to build it up with thick CA, try to blend it in, and keep the fillet as small as possible. The smaller the fillet is, the less chance there is it'll pop up. So we just want to have maybe like a little 1/16 of an inch radius, which we'll try to make up at this point in time with just layers of thick CA, really. Now the primary trick to all this sanding is having that block with the little point on it so you can get in there and of course reverse it for this side. The trick is to get this to be a nice even, where it comes together, a nice even angle. You don't want to have this fuse side with a little ripple and this wing with a little ripple. And so what I do, I just hold the point up at about a 45-degree angle and work my way right down that corner first. That corner is going to be the hardest spot to get. Now you may be thinking, oh yeah, little fillets are easy. Baloney. Little fillets have to be perfect. There's no room for error. Normally what you do, some people anyway, is they'll just blow on epoxylite. There's all kind of gaps and everything in there. Well, if you're going to do these kind of fillets, you have to have this filled in really, really accurately. So I'm taking my first, session here with the sandpaper. I want to get it as nice as possible. I really want to have the fillets as small as possible. That's another one of my goals. And then I just want to paint in a couple of coats of auto primer in here. And, and then you say to your father about 40 times to hope that the fillets don't pop up. And believe me, anybody tells you they have never had problems with fillets, just go down where their name is in your phone book and write liar, liar. No such thing. Anywhere the paint has a reverse angle, it's going to want to shrink, it's going to want to pull away. Same thing, these things are going to be a pain in the ass, I know that. But I already have a couple of coats of CA, I have them sanded out. I guess you've seen that on the yesterday or so we were doing that. Also, whenever I get to a spot like this where there's a joint, I want to sand the joint perfectly flat and put thin CA on it and resand it. So the joint itself. In other words, I could be doing that right now with the smooth block. This joint right here, I really want to get this joint as perfect as I possibly can, and then hit it with the thin CA. And of course, this is just going to be one of those time-consuming things now, picking away at it. Rub your hand on it, find little rough spots. I'm really concerned with getting the curve of the fuselage to go right down to the wing, and I can see I have a high spot right here. Again, this is just time-consuming. We'll spend a couple of hours doing this. I'll do most of it with the macro, the animation feature, so this doesn't get too boring to watch. But the point I want to make is, you can't do this job. You can't start out 9 o'clock in the morning and be done at 9:30. We've been working on this a couple of days already, 3 days in fact, and probably going to put another maybe 1 or 2 days in before I'm happy. But what I'm looking for is to have it really nice when it's done. That's the ultimate goal, is not to be done first, but to be done with the highest amount of craftsmanship. And we're hoping this plane, obviously, and at this point in time, is going to be one of the nicer, more well-finished planes that we've had. Now I want to take, I've got most of that angle sorted out. I want to take and just run a thin bead of thick CA right down the whole wing. There's a couple little gaps here. And then I'll take my pinky and just rub it up. This way it goes up on the fuse side and out onto the wing just a little bit. Now right here is where it's going to be a problem. This is where I need to put a little bit extra. Right here. This is a point in time too where I don't want to get bored with this. I don't want to get myself to the point where I'm just tired and bored and I want to get this over with. This is a critical part of getting the level of craftsmanship that I want on this. That CA hardens up the wood. And then when you're all done, just clean your fingers with acetone. And let it dry. Now this is a good little tip. After you do that, get all that CA off your fingertip, because you're going to want to use that same fingertip over and over. In my case, I prefer using a pinky, so I get it shoved right up into the gap. Now, this CA usually, I can tell you something that happened to me. Maybe you'll find this to be true, maybe you won't. When I use Satellite City thick CA, I never had a problem. This CA doesn't seem to work quite as good as Satellite City, and Sig CA and other brands don't work worth a shit as far as making a fillet without all the little bubbles and gaps and everything in them. It seems like the Satellite City thick CA, only one problem, I don't have any out of it. And we went through that thing on the last tape, we're running out of glue, so I'm going to have to live with this and just work on it. Now this dries with little bubbles in it. It doesn't dry at least quite, and if you kick it, if you hit this with kicker, goodbye. Turns into popcorn. So this is the first coat, and again, I won't belabor this. You really need maybe 3 or 4 coats. I'll get this the first coat, sand it out, and just I'm building up this little area and sanding it out onto the wing with the flat part of the block. And what I do, I take the paper off and move it so the tip constantly is working on a new piece of sandpaper. Because you're going to wear that, you can see the lines in here where it wears it out. And remember, if you decide to make little tiny fillets like this, they had better be perfect. Every little mistake is going to show. Big giant fillets, you can hide mistakes, you can hide bad wood fits, you can hide grandma in a closet, but when they're small, they had better be neat and workmanlike. Now, I'll finish sanding this off camera, then we'll get the second and third coats on. You see, like I said, you're just wearing out that one point, so you can just constantly be moving that point, and because it's sticky back sandpaper, it's right on that point that you wear it out, move the point down, and you'll get a, obviously a lot better, you can see we've used some sandpaper too. a lot better mileage out of the sticky back sandpaper. Good tip. Now it took about 5 coats of thick CA to build that fillet up to the dimension I wanted. Where that is, now wherever I've sanded these joints, I'm going to go back in and just wet them down with thin CA. That'll keep them hopefully from cracking or making them less vulnerable. Now back here we got a pretty reasonable transition here. What I'm going to do is just final sand this out now with a piece of 320, and then we'll be ready to flip it over. Well, we see if we're happy with the other side. I got both of the sides kind of sanded out here, but once we're happy with it, then we'll flip it over and we should be in a good mode to do the top. Now I'm just looking at this from every possible angle, trying to make sure I have a, well, this, I have to tell you, it took a lot longer than I thought it would, but I'm real happy with the way it came out. And it is time to flip it over, boy. Flip Wilson, flip it over. Now with the bottom done, and in case I didn't mention it, always leave the last coat sanded with, you know, a rough kind of a sanded feel. Now the purpose of that is we want that first coat of dope with extra thinner to really get a good bite. Now we're going to work on the top of this wing, and I'll do this off camera. This is just getting to be too, you know, redundant and time consuming, but we took about 5 coats of the thick CA to do what we had to do. There's no joints up here, and then we have to finish up around the canopy, and hey, we'd be ready maybe even today get some dope on his body, who knows. Kind of a labor-intensive day here, but we do have all the fillets squared away, I hope. Now one of the things I wanted to show, I've been patching this as I go. I think it's on the other tip. I got that one kind of sorted out, this one kind of sorted out. I'm going to block sand this one in here. Again, I'm just going around as I go. The last thing to do today is going to be the canopy fillet. I don't imagine that's going to be more than a half hour or so. We will get some clear dope on him today, and it can be drying. And maybe tomorrow, who knows when, we'll get this little span done. Now I pretty much use the same technique, the back and forth drill with the thick CA, the sanding blocks. There's only a couple of problems you have to worry about by a canopy. You can sand through a canopy, and each time you want to put some filler or glue or whatever, move the tape up just a little bit so you don't get that edge. I'm just going to work this in. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some dope on his fuselage. Now remember, when you put dope on a fuselage, the wood is going to all swell up, pucker up, and whatever. So that's one of the things. Then we'll re-sand it out just before we do the tissue. We'll give it another sanding. Right now we have about 99% of this done, and I am glad it's done. Now believe it or not, we are ready to start applying some dope. Now a couple of things I want to mention. First coat of dope is going to go on here about 70 thinner, and then I'm going to add a little bit of dope to the mix each time with each coat. So because this body is almost a constant curve, almost the whole body is a constant curve, I want to get only on the raw wood and on the epoxy glass up here where we glass the nose. That first coat being real thin will get a good bite. I'll give that about an hour to dry, add a little dope to the mix, maybe it'll be 60-40. We'll give it 2 or 3 coats, and then the last coat, probably about 50-50. The reason being, we want to build up some material on there so we can sand this out before we tissue it. Lightly sand it out with 320. Now this body has a tremendous amount of curves in it and radiuses and stuff, and it's really going to be a challenge to keep everything nice so you see the nice reflected curves. Not many straight angles on this body. Now when I mix this dope up, of course I'll test it on the old canopy or some little test part. I want it really to get good penetration. The whole idea of this is that the very first coat over raw wood should be very, very thin so that you get it soaking right into the grain. Try to, and again there's no guarantee, but give yourself as much of the deck stacked in your favor as you can so you don't pull up the tape, and you know the rest of it. You pull up the tape and bingo. Now this is especially true when you're going over fiberglass areas. You want the first coat to really go on here nice and thin. Again, another hot tip, I've left this the last sanding with 320 so it's not as smooth as it would be with 400. What it does, it gives it a little bite, the better bite on the first coat. And that's the reason we're going to really spend some time here. At least 5 coats of clear because we're going to be sanding it out. And of course when it's glass, the first coat is a shiny coat. Over raw wood, it's going to soak right in like a sponge, I'm sure. Now one of the last things I did here, I put the cowling on and gave every edge a nice sanding. Now the purpose, it is dope, and I only fuel proof the inside of the tank compartment with dope. There's no point putting epoxy or anything else in there. Dope is fine. You fuel proof the outside of the plane with dope. It's no different on the inside. Now it's especially helpful. Let me tell you a couple of things that are real helpful. Especially helpful. See the way I'm holding this? It runs back and seals up any of the edges or cracks or whatever's in here. This is a really good tip. Also then, if you really want it to be really cute or safe or whatever you want to call it, you could hang the plane by the tail wheel. You could do what I've seen other people do, is just pour in a shot glass full of clear, let it soak in there. If you have to, tape an Allen wrench to the end of the brush so you can get way in. But what that does, it lets it really soak in all the corners where you're really not going to be able to wipe the plane off once the life of the plane starts and you start flying it on a regular basis. Not many people pull a tank out and wipe it out on a regular basis. Maybe once a year would be the most you could expect. So getting that really fuel proof. Now that's really important too, because Mike Rogers ran into a problem where he had a hole right back here. And the problem resulted in a lot of oil getting inside the fuselage. He did not have it fuel proofed up. There was a pinhole or some kind of a hole. Next time I have him over here, I'd like him to tell that story on video. I think it's something we could all learn from. Okay, now while it's in this position, I look down there and there's a big puddle of stuff. I'm just rocking it back and forth into the corners. Like I said, if you really want to be cute, you can throw an old shot glass or two down in it and just hang it by the tail wheel, let it drip out. Again, I'll give this 5 coats inside. Keep in mind we're trying for a long life expectancy here. We're not trying for the ultimate flyweight aeroplane. What we'd like is 5 years from now still to have the structure intact. Just whatever drools out here I can kind of clean up. This is real thin dope. Thin dope is the best. Penetrates better. Get in all the areas. And of course we'll just continue painting in there for the whole process of finish. Now I want to go out with this thin dope. I want to go out onto the silver a little bit too. So the first thing I'll do, give me a coat right out onto the wing. Let that soak in. Kind of leave a rough edge if you can. It'll be easier to blend a rough edge. Pack some dope in by all the horn, all the little holes where the horn is. Now once the wood starts swelling up, you can see a lot of spots that still need some final sanding anyway. That'd be the best way to put it. Now what I do, I prop it up on pillows. This way I can get at the whole body in one shot. Get plenty on the blend out to the silver. While it's thin, it'll blend in real easy. Probably only have to just give it a few swipes of sandpaper. And in that tank compartment, I want to make sure I have plenty on the fillets too. Now especially get some over any of these little repair spots that we sanded out, and plenty of dope in by the horn. Again, I'm trying to make some speed here. The reason being, I want to get all 5 coats on today and then let this dry, so I'm kind of rushing through this. I'll give this an hour to dry between coats, and that means before I actually get my fat ass in bed tonight, I should have all 5 coats of clear on here. So rather than being redundant and just going over and over this like a wet noodle, I'll get all 5 coats on, time it, and obviously while one coat is drying, I could be doing something else. I have the rudder to work on, have some other stuff over here to work on. No time goes to waste. That's an important part. I can work on the repair on those flaps. The flaps have to be repaired. Nothing's really going to waste here. Making sure I get around the fillets on the stab and elevators. Plenty of clear. There's plenty of spots where I needed to touch this up. This last coat of silver will get sanded out again. In fact, once we get the whole plane in silver, we'll go around, pick away at it a little more carefully than we have. Be real fussy then about getting that last sanding on before we go on to painting it. Now we got all 5 coats on here. This sucker is drying up nice. It's dark outside already. Oh man, this has been a long day. Now we'll give this a day, maybe 2 to dry. Get ready to sand out. Actually, you can see one of the spots we've been putting extra clear on, where the glass ends on the nose. Of course, you really don't need 5 coats, but put them on anyway. But where the glass ends, I want to continue back to behind the canopy with extra clear, because that's a spot where the wood is soft. I don't want to stressorize it where the glass ends. Back here, this is where I want to double tissue over these joints. I don't want the joint to show through after the plane is 25 years old and already won the Nats 15 times. Anyway, this is the end of This is really the end of a very, very long day. Cowling's drying over here. Rudder's drying. Where the heck's that rudder? Come on, rudder. Anyway, excellent day. Really tired. Ready for Pizza Hut, man. Ready to do the hut. Now it looks like all the dope dried up beautifully. Just an exceptional. Well, what helps is we had the heat on in the house real high last night. See, the only spot I wasn't crazy about, I put a little DAP on this morning before I had breakfast so I could work on it. The only bad spot I saw after looking at it, the cowling looked like it dried up real nice. Now what I'm going to do, I got the rudder over there, what I'm going to do, as I always do, is make a little test on the cowl and the rudder. Take some 320 sandpaper. That's this gray stuff. 320 open coat. Dust. Now this does not mean sand all the dust off. I'm just looking for high spots. Anywhere there's a little high spot, I want to knock the high spot off, and I did notice one over here. Usually there's a little ridge where the glass ends, even though that is sanded out pretty well. And there's a couple of spots in here that I wasn't crazy about. I put some extra dope in there last night, just around the front. Up here I kind of buried it in dope, the idea being I want to get as much dope on there so I can block sand that out. And I think we're going to get the whole thing tissued today. It's an exceptionally nice day out there, so I may even be able to leave the door open and kill some of the smell in the house while I'm doing this. Karen will love it. Now again, a lot of people, the mistakes you can make, and it's easy to make these mistakes, is to sand all the dope off back to raw wood. Don't want to do that. I want to leave the dope on here. I got 5 full coats and 6 or 7 around the fillet areas. I just want to dust off all the little high spots, and most of all, radius the edges again. Remember that old thing we're doing on every coat, radius in the edges. Radius all the edges. Get in by the hinge pockets. And I'll do most of this off camera, needless to say. And what I'll try to do is take advantage of such a nice day out there. I can work with the door open here, and I'll really be a big help to Karen. She won't be breathing in all this smell of this dope. And it's early enough in the day, the house will probably be aired out before she actually gets home. Anyway, I wanted to show. That's how much sanding I'm going to do on this. Unless I find a bad spot, I'll search the spot out with my hand. I don't find any really bad spot, fine. Go on to the next piece. Curved areas like this, just dust up, roughen up, whatever you want to call it, and most of all, radius all the edges before we get to tissue it. Now if you leave this step out, what I've found happens is you get too much dope and there's little bubbles in the tissue, and then when you go to block sand it out later, sometimes you sand through and you get little holes in it, little tiny pinholes. Just this little bit of a sanding like I'm doing now, and I'll do the whole body. But I'm not spending a lot of time shaping things or changing shapes. I'm just getting off mainly radius in the re-radius in the areas, and mainly just roughing it up to where there's just a little bit of powder. It looks like I've just put some scratches in the dope. Get a good mechanical bond. We're early in the substrate here, get a good mechanical bond. And then we'll cut up the paper, cut up the tissue, medium silk span for everything, and start making a little hodgepodge of pieces that are going to go on there. Now I'm sure what happened here is from sanding this angle, I just ran the corner of the block in here. But now to clean it up, I want to make sure I'm using the flat spot of the block only. And what I'll do, as soon as I'm finished getting this block sanded in, block sanded flat anyway, I'll get a couple of coats of dope on it so that there's enough dope on the DAP I don't get a bubble or a blister, especially here on the top of the fuse. I'd like it to be, you know, as nice, obviously the top of the body as nice as possible. The whole plane nice. What am I talking about? Now, whenever you go down, and what I've done is I've gone through into the raw wood, put a little thin CA there, and just wipe it with a paper towel. That'll harden it up enough that you can get a nice blend in. Now, I have that all sanded out. You constantly hear me talking about putting in a new X-Acto knife, a new blade. Well, I just went through the last one of the first box of 100. We have used 100 number 11 blades, or pretty close to it, up to this point. Now, the reason I say that is I want to have new blades, and I'm going to go steal Karen's nice Fiskars, so I can cut the tissue One of the things I'm going to try to do is get nice butt joints. But what I don't want to have is a little gap in between. It's better to have a little bit on, overlap than it is to have a gap where you don't have any tissue. We're going to use all medium tissue for the whole body. I just wiped the whole plane off with paper towels and I'm ready to start cutting tissue. Again, this is what I prefer, ST002 medium silk span. For this size plane, I think this is the appropriate material right now. Now what I want to do is, just to make sure everything's exactly how I want it, I want to do the rudder first. Make sure I have enough thinner in the dope. Now here's another thing. You don't want to have the dope so thick now that you don't get any thinner penetrating down into the clear that's already on here. So having a little bit of extra thinner, I would say 60 thinner now. We had 50-50 for the last coat, 60 thinner right now because you want it to go down and bite into this and get a good grip. You don't want to be pulling a silk span up with the tape. Now, of course, it's always a good idea just to do that little test. I put a little additional thinner in here. Still looks a little on the thick side. I want to make sure. Now, this coat that's going to go down in here, this is just an absolute critical time that you get this coat to bind. Because this silk span is adding a lot of strength. You just wet down a big piece of silk span. This is more of a test than anything else. Again, this is pretty much, and I'm not going to belabor this too much, pretty much the same as doing a wing. The only difference is because you have so many curves and so many angles and so many little things here, you just really have, a little more care with the joints is in order. Now, while it's wet, needless to say, let's get one side cut off, flip it over, and do the other side before it bends into one position. Again, this is where I like to have a brand new number 11 blade. Brand new razor is even better, but I don't have any. And of course, Karen's great scissors. Karen, if she ever finds out why her scissors get dull so fast. I have my shop scissors, and boy, you can cut tin cans with them. And then we have Karen's real nice Fiskars. I think we're going to sneak up and get her Fiskars. Debbie, don't you tell Karen we're using her Fiskars. Now, just by this little test that I just fooled around with, I can see I'd like to have a little more thinner in the paint, in the dope, give it a little more time to dry. This is kind of drying up before I want it to. So I'll just pour off a little of that clear, get a little thinner in there. Maybe we go to about 65 thinner for this. A little bit extra thinner here. And maybe what's happening here is I have the heat turned up in the house, even though it's a nice day outside, because I want this stuff to dry. Remember, the warmer it is, the more thinner you're going to want in the paint, in the dope. Now, when you're trimming the edges on the fuselage especially, one of the tricks I always remember, you could always take a little jar and soak the knife blades in thinner. This way you don't get that dope buildup. And when a blade is brand new, believe me, it'll just cut like butter. As soon as you get a buildup of dope on there, it's going to make you crazy. Now in this case, we have all these little hinge pockets to deal with too. So that might be maybe a good thing here if I have a clean jar over there. Put some thinner in it. We'll try that again. That was a good tip. I forget who sent that in even. Brain power that I have lately. Now this is why I always like to do a little test. Always test on the little parts first, because you always have that option then to fine-tune the thinner before we get into doing a big fuselage nose or a fuse side. Make the mistake on a little part, it's a lot easier to recover. I think just a little more thinner here, combined with the heat we have in the house, is going to make this kind of cut and dry. Should be real good. Now, in case I haven't mentioned it, this is the only thinner that I use in the shop. I do not even like to have other thinner in the shop other than for cleaning guns. After many, many years of experimenting and many, many ruined planes, this is what I thin everything with. I know I've mentioned it, but it's worth repeating. Now what's happened is, and this is an important thing to think about, what's happened is when we've doped this fuselage down and wetted it down, what's happened, we have a little bit of an offset in the elevators now. You can see it's a little bit higher on this side than this side. So that's constant monitoring and babying. What's happening, the fuselage is drying unequally now. But if this is true at the end of silk spanning it, then what I want to do is while it's drying out, I'll wet the whole fuselage down. Let's see if you can see it from the front. This side is higher than this side. While it's drying, I can put a little weight on there, a little 4-ounce jar of dope or something, just to put the twist back in the fuselage. So it's a very small amount now, but we want to constantly, it's called babysitting, I call it babysitting, making sure, because every time you dope, the dope wets the wood shrinks, the wood twists, the top blocks twist, who knows what else. But constantly monitoring it. So I'm going to start tissuing the nose, work my way to the back of the fuselage, and then get 3-4 coats of dope on, clear dope. But while that 3 coats is drying, I'll put it in a jig somehow and put a little weight on that outside stab tip. That's a great idea. Monitor it. Now I want to get a piece of tissue that's large enough. I want to try to get most or all of the nose right up to the leading edge done in one piece. Can leave a little bit hanging off, but I don't want to leave double the amount hanging off. I've been using Windex to wet it down, needless to say. But keep in mind that tail moving around like that's perfectly normal. Not something you want to lose sleep over. But you want to monitor it. And that fuselage can change every time you wet it down, every time you put the dope on it. It's subject to a change. Okay, I'm going to dampen up the tissue, of course. We got a nice thin dope here. Now what I want to do is go behind, just a little bit, behind the spot where the tissue is going to end. Again, if I have a choice, I'd like to get a joint overlap and not have a gap. I don't want any gaps where there's no tissue. That's where there'll be a stress riser and more than likely a crack if you have a gap. If there's no gap, you can have all the joints in the world. It just means you're going to have to sand it out just a little bit more. And we're not looking to make this, you know, the world's easiest plane to build. We just want the world's nicest. And we want long life, longevity. Like any man, I would like to live. Martin Luther King. Okay. Like any stunt ship, I would like to live. Okay, plenty of dope. Again, most of this is redundant. I'm not going to put a whole lot of this on the tape. If you get the whole idea, this is why I put extra thinner in this dope. I want some time to work this in. When the dope is thick, it just dries up too fast. I want some time to pull out the wrinkles and sort through this just a little bit. And especially the nose. Now I really don't want any gaps in the nose here, that's for sure. Even if you wind up with a couple of wrinkles, they're going to ultimately sand out. You don't have to worry about that. Especially over the glass. Now I could trim this away right in front of the wing here. And don't be afraid to just pull it up and put it back down. Now what'll happen now too is when this body is wet like this, it's going to relax the tension in the fuse and that tail will probably go back to being straight. But then as it dries, especially if it's drying with heat on it, it might dry unequally again. We just got to constantly monitor it. And that's the kind of tips I like to put on a video, because what'll happen if you're building a plane and you see that happens to you, you think, oh, I'm the only guy this ever happened to. Baloney, it happens to everybody. Everybody in this hobby is dealing with the same problems. Fillets lifting, planes coming out too heavy, nose construction, same old thing, nothing new. Haven't really invented a whole lot of new stuff. And when you get real satisfied with it, you just press it down with your hand. You can get most of the wrinkles out. The last few we can just don't be too worried about it. Now as the dope starts to dry, you can see it gets stickier and stickier, and you can get the wrinkles to kind of just press down. And I just use my bare hand. Get many of the wrinkles, you know, the more you can get out, of course you'll have less sanding. You also don't want to end the tissue exactly where the glass ends. You want to have a little bit of a chance of saving that edge. I got one more loose spot up here. And as the dope is drying up and getting a little stickier, you can pull out, press out the wrinkles. If you see they're drying, just put some more raw dope right on top of them. And if you don't get one out, it's not the end of the world. It's 3/4 tacked out. I can use that nice new blade, trim off the extra tissue, and move on to the next spot. And just press the edge down. And what you might want to do, in this case I'm going to do this, is while I get the edges trimmed off, any wrinkle that really still is in here, that's you can feel with your hand, slit it with a razor. Just slit the wrinkle and then pat it back down. Let's see if we have one over here. This one's pretty good. We got one right up here. Just put a little slit right down the wrinkle. Press it down with your finger. Up here there's one. That'll help kill that wrinkle anyway. Give us a little less sanding later on. Just slit the wrinkle at this point in time. And now before this even dries up, I'll get another coat of dope on it and press this right down. Especially where you just slit the wrinkles, just rub it right down with your bare hands. Try to get that good adhesion. Now those two slits under the body, those two little troughs or ditches, whatever you want to call them, anything that has a reverse curve, you don't want to have the tissue go out onto the wing fillet. You don't want to have the tissue go down into those two little air outlet troughs. You're just asking for trouble if you tissue any reverse curve. Any curve where if the dope shrinks, it's going to pull up. And that's the whole idea of making a fillet small. Give the dope less leverage to pull up. Nothing seems to beat the final little amount. Just press it down with your hands. That just seems to be a trick worth its weight in gold, worth its weight in pumpkin seeds. Okay, we got up to the leading edge done. Now what I'm going to do, the next piece, I want to make a piece that'll basically go I want to overlap over this joint because this is where the glass is going to end. I want to have a nice, plenty of dope in there to blend that in. From here, maybe to the front of the canopy in one piece, make it a little oversized, and then trim it even with the fillets. That would be the next piece. Again, I'm just trying to make a rough pattern here. I don't want it to go out over the fillets, just up to the fillets. I'm trying not to press down hard so I don't leave a gouge in the wood. So that's what that little, I got this side off too. That's what this little side is going to look like. I'm trying not to press into that wood. It's just like doing a jigsaw puzzle from this point on. You just want to make, and I know people that have done the fuselage in all pieces the size of postage stamps. No problem. Okay, that'll be that piece. Okay, we have everything to the back of the canopy done now, to the middle of the canopy. Next piece I'm going to lay out the same thing, a piece that goes along the top block and as far down a fuse side as I can get here. Just do it in postage stamp size pieces. It's just a redundant thing from this point on. I'm just going about this as methodically as I can. You don't have to cover, in big pieces. You can do a lot of small pieces if you're more comfortable doing it that way. Now I've got everything from here to there done, and I have to connect the two. There's a little piece this shape right in here. I'll make one piece for this side, one piece for that side. Let it overlap a little bit. Now I'll just spin this around and do the other side the same. Block out the rudder in one piece, this piece in one piece, and maybe get most of the bottom block in one piece. It'll be relatively straightforward. Alright, next step, I'll flip this over. It'd be easier to do this piece from the bottom, two square pieces, and then figure out what I'm going to do about the bottom. Be closing in on this now. Coming out pretty good. I'm trying to get a piece of tissue that'll just fit right down in there. Now I'll do this side the same, and then just fill in the bottom block, and that's it.
Shoes. Do you have the new Nike Air Elite Max?
What for? What you need is a good high-tech carpooling shoe.
What you need is Lady Foot Locker, where you'll find the largest selection of Nikes anywhere, including the new Nikes for running, walking, aerobics, and cross training. The new Nike Air Huarache, Air Elite Max, and Air Cross Trainer Low. Lady Foot Locker has them. And at Lady Foot Locker, you'll get respect, expertise, and understanding. Because Lady Foot Locker is the only athletic footwear and apparel store designed exclusively for women. So come on down and see the latest in Nike shoes and apparel at Lady Foot Locker. Just do it. Mom, we got a good boy this year.
I don't get many complaints, you know what I mean?
Good. Ask Santa for a brain.
Now just remember, I don't want to get any up into those little air outlets, so I'll get right up to the edge of the air outlet. Right about here. And we'll be ready to get in about 5 minutes. I just have this last little piece. Look around for all the little tiny, and there's a bunch of them on here, all the little tiny spots that may still be raw wood. And we'll just make up little postage stamps, little pieces, or whatever we need to get in there, so that everything is covered with tissue, at least one layer of tissue. Now once this dries up just a little bit, we can get in here and get out all this extra tissue. And once you pull this piece out, needless to say, you can use it right in there. It's the perfect shape. You have plenty of dope inside that nose section too. Now here's an example of a little spot where the two joints don't exactly meet. You just take a little postage stamp size piece and we'll fill in all the other little spots. Looking back there, there's a little spot. Just look around anywhere there's a little spot, so everything is tissue covered. Okay, I'm going to give this a good hour. Give it a good solid hour to dry out. In fact, what it is, it's such a nice sunny day out there. I don't know if you can see how nice and sunny it is. I'm going to take this outside and let it dry outside. I have some work to do outside. And I'm going to, about once an hour, going to come in and put one coat of clear on. I'd like to get 3 to 4 coats. I'll see how this starts to dry up roughly an hour apart, about 50-50, and then hopefully either tomorrow or the next day this will be ready to start sanding out and then start getting our filler on. Well, it has been drying for quite a while now. What I did, I mentioned, is I put a weight out on the tip of the stab, and if you see now, if I start to try to get the alignment, I'm just a little bit lower on this side, but when I take that glass wax bottle off, I'm just babysitting it right to the point where it dries dead even. Remember, it was crooked that way before, so just by doing that, we've solved one of the little problems, hopefully. Anyway, the clear is drying up. We're going to come back tomorrow. Hopefully sand it down a little, maybe even get some filler on it tomorrow. Now Mike Chioda of Long Island sent these pictures in. These are great pictures. I'm going to save these for Brian. I'll give these two to Brian Kiefer. Look at this sucker, man. Thinks he's Elvis Presley. Anyway, sent in some other random pictures here. He sent a nice picture of Sanami in here, of course. Never have too many pictures of old Sanam. Another nice picture of Big Jim giving Bob Lampione the Pineapple Award. All right. And a picture here, I got a picture of his plane. Mike Chioda's Mustang Sally, and needless to say, you never have too many Mustangs, that's for sure. And a really great picture. This is really a real super picture of Bob Lampione flying upside down. Lampione, get the negative from him. That's a great picture. Just shows you that you have your priorities upside down. and a really nice picture of Midgley's plane. Anyway, appreciate all the pictures. We'll pass them on to Tom Morris, of course. Keep the pictures coming. Now what I did today, I measured the amount. I'm about halfway through with getting this tail back into where it should be. So what it's going to tell me is I'll need another day or two of babysitting that, and each time I get the fuselage wet with dope, I'll jig it up as I did before and put that Windex bottle on there until I get most of or all of the twist out of that tail. So that's one of the things that we've been working on. The other thing today is I'm going to sand out all the tissued areas, 320, and what I'm really trying to do is just break. You can see the joint here. I want to just get it so I can't see the joint. I only want to sand into this enough. I don't want to sand down to the tissue, but wherever there's a rough spot or a joint, I want to make it that I'm just seeing the hairs of the tissue come through and stop, and then start to put the filler coats on, and we'll obviously be deciding whether we need 2 or 3 coats of filler on this. Now, as I always do, I take my test piece, which in this case is the rudder, just to get an idea if this is going to sand out reasonably. Now, if I didn't let this dry long enough, what'll happen is, and it's pretty obvious, you're going to have chewing gum all over the sandpaper. Now, this looks okay. Usually when you have chewing gum, it means you put the paint on, you put the dope on too thick, number one. Didn't give it enough time to dry between coats, and that's a typical thing if you put one coat on right after another, or in my case, less than an hour. And always have a little part you can test on. Now, if all of a sudden we're picking up chewing gum here, we can wait till tomorrow and we'll go do something else today. Okay, it looks like we're going to be able to sand this and work on this. Now, looking at this part on the macro lens, this is an unsanded side. You can see we even have a brush hair in there. Just trying to get an idea of, at least maybe you can see what the texture looks like. Even if you touch it, it's kind of rough. Now, sanding this out, it's kind of powdery. As soon as you see anything that looks like the tissue coming through, you kind of have to stop. And again, this is not a super sand out. By now you should have everything shaped, and in the, the flats should all be flat, the curves should all be curved, and you're just cleaning off the high spots, just taking off the mountaintops. Let's see how close we can get to this. Nope, just hope you can get an idea of what the texture here is like. Now, having these sanding tools available right now, like for getting in the hinge pockets, getting around the horn, all the little areas that you want to get all the radiuses back, all the angles back. This is one of those steps that everybody tries to leave out, and you think, oh, well, I really don't need to go back and sand that. I'll just put the filler on. Well, if you sand it out, what you're doing is like an oil change in your car. You pay me now or pay me later. You will ultimately save 2 or 3 times the amount of time by not having to go back later on. Get all the edges radiused. I mean, I spend typically on a fuselage as much time sanding out the fuselage as the whole rest of the plane put together. Only because there's all curves, all little corners, angles, canopies, radiuses, and because I really do want to have it as good as I possibly can. Well, I would say from doing all these little parts, we're ready to go. So I'm going to get myself in gear for a nice sanding session on that body. Even the cowling dried up real nice. Now I've sanded this. This is the overlapping joint. Remember, the glass ended in the middle of this, so this is giving me like a little bit of a mountain to work on. I've radiused off all the edges around these scoops and outlets and inlets and everything. And pretty much I'll just work right on, get right in the angle here as carefully as possible. Right into the scoop areas up around here. That's a big part of it. Now the nose is half under control. Now the same as I tissued the body, I'll work my way back, flip it over, and then work my way back forward. Again, after sanding, you can just about see, and I'll try to get this on the macro, just about start to see tissue hairs come through. And then you know you're ready for, well, stop sanding. You don't want to sand the tissue off, but you're ready for a couple of coats of filler and a couple of days of drying. Now where you eat up most of the time here is getting right around the fillets, getting in on both sides with the fillets. It just is so time consuming. And I really want this area around the canopy to be really nice too. Anywhere there's a fillet, I've been spending a lot of extra time on. In the back where the rudder linkage hooks on, that's another area that just seems to eat up an awful lot of time. Awful lot of time just getting in the corners and angles and edges. Now these rubber blocks, just perfect for doing these concave areas. So yeah, I think the main thing here is just to be patient, not try to do the whole thing in one sitting. Take some coffee breaks. And all these fillet areas, this is what's really consuming an awful lot of time, but I really want to, because the fillets are very small, they have to be perfect. They're going to show every little mistake. You don't have the luxury of like an epoxylite fillet where you can just glob it on, and if it doesn't come out, glob some more on. And needless to say, you don't spend the whatever the weight of epoxylite is. We've saved that too. Never hurts to save an ounce. Trying to get all these edges radius as best we can too. A good old machinist ruler comes in real handy here, real handy. Again, what we're trying to get is these corners and edges. Now I want to get the filler. I put a little bit extra thinner in this filler. I want to get the first coat of filler on very thin relative to the rest of it. I want to, needless to say, do a little test here. This is very thin filler now, very thin. The idea of this first coat of filler is that any of the loose tissue, and you will have some loose tissue, you can get it to stick back down, and the thinner helps do that. Oh, there goes President Nixon again. Hang on, guys. I can't believe it. Even though President Nixon's dead, he still calls me every day. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to mention on the video is I want to get a real good coat of filler in the fillets, around the canopy, the top block up here, maybe even a little extra. I'm going to try to get 2 thick coats on. 1 thin coat and 2 thick coats. That first coat I put thinner in, the second coat I'll just add some clear. I want to get it on, and this is the Christmas weekend, so over Christmas this will all be drying. While I'm opening my presents, getting all my Super Tiger 60s. I know Debbie Borelli's buying me a Tiger 60. Peggy Ortiz liked to kill me with her gummy bears. Hey, that's the price. Anyway, I'll get the rest of this filler on. And the whole deal, then I'm going to put it back in babysitting mode so that the tail has a little weight on one side and let it sit over the Christmas holiday, just like that. It's no more... Now put some extra filler in here because we know there's no tissue there, and really work down those fillets just a little bit extra. But here's the thing you don't want to do. I've seen a lot of people that do this is fill that whole area. Try to make a fillet out of dope. It's just going to churn the chewing gum. Don't even bother. Just give it the same amount, and I've gone out onto the wing. You can see how far I've gone out onto the wing. I've put a little extra filler on all my little repairs, the repair out by the tip. The bottom of the fuselage, the bottom block was really a little bit too thin for my liking, so I've put on a lot of the places have double tissue, a whole extra coat. I'm letting that kick off now. Then I'm going to flip this over and give one final coat to the top. Now there'll be one extra coat on it. The top will actually have 4 coats. The bottom will have 3. So that's about standard for this kind of this amount of filling that we want to do. Now I'm waiting to get this last coat on the top, and what I do, by having it propped up like this, I can get down underneath. Now the whole body is going to be, for all purposes, wet. The dope will be wet, and then by putting that little weight on a tail, I can get some of that tail leveling done. Now this last coat I'm shaking up, I'm not going to let it decant. I'm just going to put it on full strength. I should have a good bind on that coat by now. Now I'm back to babysitting this. I'm putting this away now. Hopefully I can get that tail to straighten out as the dope dries. But I guess we're in better shape than I think we are. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and the plane probably the day after Christmas or between the week of Christmas and New Year's Eve will be in silver, so I'll be real happy to see that. Now just take a little break. This is, believe it or not, this is Christmas Eve. I came down this morning just to see how my stab was doing and my filler was doing. Well, the filler is not really dry enough to even sand. I had about an hour to sand, so I did the mail, and I wanted to share this with you. This is what came in the mail from Larry Cunningham. Real nice set of photos. This is Larry Cunningham's plane. But there's some real interesting ones in here that he sent in. And I know, I won't mention any names, but I know somebody out there that'll just love that paint job. This is Larry's plane too, Abracadabra. This is one of Ted's older planes. Nice photo of this. Now keep in mind, I'll pass all these on to Tom Morris. So if anybody sends photos in, they get a double purpose. You will get them on the video, and we'll also, you know, get them into stunt news too, so they can possibly be used in stunt news. Nice picture of Jim Damarell's plane here. Real nice. This is an SV-11 by Mark Bowen. The Larry Cunningham's Roadrunner. And in this picture I want to show you the caption. This is Larry wrote these captions. Some Joyzy guy. Flip it over and it's Jim Borelli. Oh no, it's windy. Sends me a nice picture of Tsunami there from the Nationals. Anyway, this is the picture I've been wanting to show, and I'll read this first. Mark Bowen's floaty. It's a buster flown off the Las Cruces field under irrigation water. So looks what he did. He took a buster and made pontoons for it. Or well, we made it. We made it through the Christmas holidays. And I know even before I start to sand this has been sitting for 4 days now, actually. It's going to sand like butter, and that's the whole key to sanding filler. Now from this point on, it'll be 320 sandpaper. I'll sand out the filler and maybe even get some silver on today. But more important, all these little repair areas, and I think everybody has little repair areas when you're going around working on a plane in the real world. I have these pretty much ready for silver. This ready for silver, and it's just a question of getting this all sanded out now to the final 320. Even if you wanted to use 400 now, it would be fine since we have sanded out all the filler coat areas. So I'm going to take my time here. I actually have the whole day today, and what I'd like to do is before the end of the day have everything sanded out, and maybe even on our repair areas, get some silver on everything. That'd be nice if I could get that done today. I've said before, the whole trick to sanding any filler, let it dry. Don't put it on too thick, put it on in thin coats. Sand it, 320, 400. I'm going to try 320 here. I'll get up on a macro lens. This is how fast it should sand out. It should not be an ordeal. But what I do want to spend a lot of time, and this is the final time probably I'll really, except for the sanding of the silver, be able to get all the edges radiused. Spoke to Jim Borelli several times over the Christmas holidays, and he got a Cardinal kit for Christmas, so I assume he'll be building that, and wish him good luck with that, of course. Joe Ortiz has a kit. So we may see some more Cardinals coming out here this year. All right, I'm going to put this on a macro lens. This, you can just get an idea of how quick this sands out. When it dries for a couple of days, it's beautiful. This side is this half here is unsanded, and you saw how long it took me to sand this. I'm trying to use a block whenever possible and radius all the edges, and I'll get in by the hinge pockets, of course, with my little machinist ruler. Now once I sand this filler off, and I'll do this this and the rudder first, this should be ready for some silvers. If it isn't, if there's dry spots, I'll go back, put some clear on it, give it a half hour, an hour to dry, and then shoot it with silver, but I hope I at least get these parts in silver today. Here's the repair area on a wingtip we've been working on, and of course, just blending it back and forth, blending it in, picking out the high spots here, and then put some more filler on it. This is all dry. Should be able to just lightly sand this off by hand and put silver on that. Looking around here, some of the other spots, we have a repair spot up here I wanted to work on. Up around here, I want to get an X1. I want to sand in that fillet. I'm trying to keep these fillets as small as possible so I don't have any fillet problems. Out there's a spot I want to work on. And of course I'll start putting a final dressing off on all the inside areas inside the nose. So it may be a little more time consuming than I originally thought, but I'm going to spend some time, and it'll be to good use today. Any time I spend today, I hope, when the silver goes on there, there'll be very little left to do once the silver's on there. Now in this operation I found a real useful tool. This is one of those rubber pads that Jim Damarel brought over, and what goes on here, I'll try to do this on the macro lens. Take a piece of 320, put it right over this side, the side that has all the little bumps, and what I've been doing, I've been sanding the nose with this. In other words, you can get this contour real nice. Anything where you have a where you have a pad, where you have a curve, like on the nose, the leading edge, where you just want to get one smooth curve going around the whole thing with the filler coat. What I did, I tried it on one side just to see how it was working. Boy, you breathe enough of this dust in, unbelievable. And it looks like it's working real well, so I wanted to include that on the video. Any place there's a curve, I assume it's going to be real useful there, anywhere there's just a slight curve. Seems to work well. Just in doing the nose, I've used all different methods here, all different little blocks, little pieces to get in the cowl scoops. And I think part of this is you just have to improvise, getting in here, getting around inside, getting the whole nose nice and smooth. Since the nose and the canopy are going to be a focal point, I'm spending a lot of time up there. It's just a question, we're going to just do this, we'll probably do the rest of it off camera. Just improvise and get the whole thing sanded out, and then we'll have to decide where we need more filler. Now here's a little tip you can use. I left the sandpaper on the machinist ruler and just took the 320, bent it around and put some masking tape on it. And this allows me to get inside, unless you get some 320 sticky back paper, it allows me to get down into the scoops and get those nice corners and edges. I'm putting an awful lot of time into the corners and edges here. A couple of machinist rulers cost you a couple of dollars. They make great sanding tools, and you can use them for rulers. And it really looks disgusting when you look in here and you see, all that junk in there. So Russ Hunsberger took a piece of chrome aluminum, and I think Suarez did too. But I want to have paint in there. I want to have this all paint. And of course the biggie, get all the edges. Now I've got back to the back of the canopy done so far. I can see one thing, I'm going to need another coat of filler on here. I've been trying to keep the filler to a minimum, but on the other hand, I know when I don't have enough on, I got spots, high spots jumping right through. So rather than think about silver today, we'll think about the last coat of filler. Now here's just a couple of things, a couple little notes I wanted to make. Is you can see, when you see the tissue joints coming through and you can still feel the raw edges where the tissue is doubled, that's the indication that you're going to need another coat of filler. And of course, this is the time you have to knuckle under and say, hey, I know this is a pain in the ass, but I'm going to sand it out again. I also, every coat I'm getting in with the pointy sanding block and knocking these fillets down. I don't want these fillets to start building up. The thinner you can keep the paint on the fillet, the more chance you have it's not going to bubble up. I also want to get in here with the block. Notice each coat well, you can't see it here. Each coat I'm sanding a little further out into the silver so I get a nice blend. When I shoot the body, I'll just put the silver right out there. In here, I want to be real careful I don't get a lot of paint buildup. I'll use that little rubber reverse curve block in there. I want to make sure all the corners on here are dressed off nicely, all radiused edges, all inside. I don't want to see the paint start peeling up inside the cowling for whatever reason. So anyway, this was, not disappointing, but knowing I'm going to have to put another coat of filler on this, it just means I have to really, suck it up and do it. I really wanted to get silver on this today. Spent a couple hours sanding this so you can see in the back. The tissue joints come through. Now if you sand that anymore, it really doesn't do any good. You're just going to sand the tissue off. So that's right about at the point that you want to knuckle under, put the other coat. And if this needs even another coat of filler, who cares? It's just going to be another day of, not doing whatever else I would do if I wasn't doing this. And who knows what that is even. Committing organized crime or something. Anyway, and of course that's why we always like to have our little test pieces. So, without further ado here, I'm going to shake up the filler and get some filler on here. Now before I even put that coat of filler on, one of the things I like to do is put the motor in and tighten the bolts as tight as I intend to tighten them. Because what it does, if you have any clearance problem with the bolts coming through, they'll come through the top block right now, or they'll make a little blister for you. In this case, they're fine. Usually because I seal that with epoxy, that epoxy pushes out on the top block, and then I can sand that little dimple out. In this case, it doesn't look like we have a dimple. While I have it in this mode too, what I want to do is just check my cowling fit. Make sure I don't have any funny place on that cowling that I'm not happy with. Now I can just final check my spinner fit, all the cowling fits, make sure I have enough room plenty of clearance, so if I move more or less offset in the motor, I have plenty of clearance around the needle valve. Also, one of the things I have to look at doing here, I have to put a brass eyelet right out here. I have to put a little piece of tubing. I'll set that up right now. I want to get that in before I put the final coat of filler on the body, but I think that's going to be a halfway nice cowl anyway. Now here's a great little tool you want to have if you're going to do any kind of side exhaust engines. This is always a good idea to have. Just a piece of 1/8 inch music wire, 4, 5, 6 inches long. What I did, I went over to the grindstone, put a nice point on it, a real nice sharp point. Now what that does, that allows me to line up, and I'll try to do this on camera. It allows me to line up. I shove the pointy end right through. Let's get this in focus. And what if you look by, it'll just line up exactly where the hole has to be for the Allen wrench, and I can just tap that right through. That spots me a hole, and then I can drill a little bit over 1/8 inch size hole here and put an eyelet in from this side, trim it off. What that does, it protects it. If you don't put the little brass eyelet in there, what happens after 20 times of tightening, this gets all chewed up and starts to look like a Cabbage Patch doll's ass, you know. So this is a nice little tool. If you were going to have a cowling like a Walt Prey cowling that covers the whole engine, keep in mind what you want to do. You could spot this hole too. 1/8 inch wire fits right into the Tiger holes with a nice tight fit. You get a perfect alignment for your bolts that way. Good little tip. Now SIG SH215 eyelets, of course we'll just take one out. I'll mic this brass tubing part, try to get an accurate drill size and just drill through that and then press the eyelet in, and of course I'll have to trim the eyelet off. Okay, it looks like the eyelets are 165, so I'll go find a drill. It's 165. Now, of course, the eyelet is going to be oversized, and then I want a tight fit here. I'm just going to mark it. How's my pen? Mark it with a little ink and go trim it off. Now, just one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to try trimming this off while it's here. I've tried that. Try zona sawing it off, and you always wind up boogering up the fuse sides. I'll trim this off with the little departing wheel. Alright, here's the final amount cut off, and that's ready to epoxy right in. Hey, the epoxy's all dry, and you can see what I have here. I'll just dust this off with the block, some 320 paper, and let the filler, the next coat of filler, fill in there. And we still, of course, have to put tank vents on. I'll do that after, buff out the plane, but it's a good idea to get this guy in before you actually get any further into this. In fact, I should have put that on sooner. Okay, but that is one of the little detail touches that'll make the difference. Again, just what we're looking for here is not to finish the plane as soon as possible, but for the nicest possible and the most longest lasting finish we possibly can get on this. Now, needless to say, I'll start with my my little parts here. Give these a nice coat of filler. Work up all the, and this is where it starts to get labor intensive. Work on all these little spots that we've been repairing over the while, the last little time. And I guess this is like normal human behavior. I always try to do as few coats as filler as possible, and I'm always thinking, yeah, I can get away with 1 or 2, but you always wind up with 3 or 4, and you're always trying to avoid that sanding out. Boy, that's breathing in all that dust and everything. But hey, when you want the best it possibly can be, sometimes you just have to pay, and this is one of the places you have to pay. There's several places on the plane, like I call them watersheds, where you need this brush. Now just when you need it the least, the brush is starting to drop hairs into the paint. Just what I need. Anyway, as you see them go by, you can just pull them out, but I'll get another coat of filler on this, hopefully give it a day or two to dry. And you're always trying to avoid that. Boy, I'm going to go for a new brush here pretty soon. The brush is really starting to shed. The reason brushes shed a lot of times is you don't clean them real good, and then the hairs break from the dope being attached to them. I guess that's a good thing to put on a video. Alright, anyway, I'll get the rest of this on the animation feature and get that next coat of filler on there, and then we'll have to wait for it to dry. Now everything has the first coat of filler, but now I'm going to be real selective and just find the spots where I have double tissue joints and get a second coat right on, just on those areas, or on bad spots that I'm trying to fill in. Double tissue area up here. You can see the dry spot, and where the fillet ends, you want to blend that in. Back here there's a spot. Just be real selective. There's no point putting another whole coat of filler on spots that are in pretty good shape. You just want to go around and find spots that might need the second coat. Okay, while our fill is drying up, but believe it or not, it's like 50 degrees outside, 60 degrees. So what I'm going to do, I got about another hour left. I'm going to take the flaps, sand them out a little bit in the spots that I'm repairing, and try to get some silver on them, and just get a feel for you know, how we are as far as weather for spraying. Not going to be able to spray until we sand this out, of course, but can get some silver shot today. So it's the idea of doing it piece by piece. You get a little bit of. Now it looks real nice. I sanded out this cowl just to see how the silver would dry out there today. Looks like it's going to dry real nice. So I'm going to work on those flaps, get some more silver on this stuff. This way when we get ready to do the final sand out of the filler, maybe I'll be ready to sand this out too. Never miss a time that you could be sanding out silver. You know, I could work on this elevator. I just sanded out this bad spot I have here, get some more silver on it, and I'll be ready for the next sand out. Always, if you can take advantage of spraying some silver, get some on. This way, you always can fill in a day with fixing up these parts with all little nicks and dings. Now you can see that one. That's almost perfect. And I touched up a little spot on this edge too. Just constantly going around like this. What it is I'll have all this little bullshit out of the way when it comes time to do the fuselage, and then I can really put some time into the fuselage. Now when I check this one out, I got one little fingerprint back here. I'm going to put some nitrous stain on it. Because it's so nice outside, I'll just put this outside to dry for 5 minutes and I'll be ready to sand this out. And of course it's right in the trailing edge, right in the worst spot. When you're trying to put on paper thin amounts of nitrous stain, the best thing is a razor blade. Just get that wrapped right around the trailing edge. Now even the rudder sanded out real nice. I want to go get some silver on this rudder. Hey, maybe this day's turning out better than I thought it would. Rudder and silver looks fine. Looks like this can dry up. Now being we have this great weather out there, I'm trying to take advantage of it. I'll get the two flaps done too. The idea here is I'll have everything done except the main frame, I hope, the main part, the fuselage. So actually, the patience that I've put into this is starting to pay off. Each coat now sands out a lot quicker than a coat before. When you get it this smooth, you can really go through it and make some time. And you just have the one or two little bad spots, the little nitrous stain spots. It goes a lot faster. From this point on, sanding it out will really be a lot less work. This is that spot up here that we wanted to repair. The repair is dry and sanded out nicely. I'll just go out and hit that with some silver. Well, this is real nice when you can get this much done in one day. Handy. The little pliers with the spring on them for holding the cowling, that's a handy little way. The rest of the stuff we've just hung. While this is going to dry, we'll let this dry overnight. Hopefully tomorrow we can come back here, sand out the fuse, get some silver on the fuse, and let's just hope the weather holds out. This has really been a spectacular day. Now this morning I'm just looking around at how this dried up. Today's goal will be to get the fuse sanded out, get out there. Believe it or not, we still have good weather the last couple of days. Get the silver on the fuse and then put it aside to dry for a couple of days. And it's a good time right now to remember that magic word, patience, patience, patience. I'll take my time sanding this out. And boy, I'll tell you, I've done a lot of sanding in the last month. I hope nobody, my fingers are like raw meat here anyway. But you really do have a sense of pride when you look at how nice this came out. This really is whistle clean and very close to being perfect. I'm sure the few people around the Borellis, whatever, of the world, will certainly appreciate the workmanship in this airplane. It will not be for nothing. I'm just trying to get all this little details done before I'm ready to spray the silver.
Quoting Bill Copy again in the Daily News. The Dodgers won that night 2-0 over the Pirates. A 5-hitter for Danny McDivitt never realized the stardom for which he was destined. After the final out, the crowd filed silently and sadly out of the stately old ballpark for the last time. Out of respect for the dearly departed, there was no ravaging for souvenirs. The grounds crew methodically covered the infield and the pitcher's mound with the tarp, as if there was to be another game the following day. The Dodgers never came back. No team did, and within a few years, the grand old ballpark was leveled and replaced by apartments. Ebbets Field is gone, but many of us don't believe it. We're 12 years old, and Ebbets Field still exists in our minds. It always will be.
Now, there's two things I want to do before I actually go outside and get the spraying of the silver. Wipe the whole thing with M600. That gets off all the extra talc and, of course, all your fingerprints. Make sure you have some extra fisheye killer in this coat of silver. And I forgot, I want to bring this tape up just a little bit and break that edge around there. That's the next thing, too. Thanks. If it is building, and when you don't want, yeah. Just to show how we've moved this up maybe a 64th or 32nd of an inch, and then we'll break this edge with sandpaper so we won't get that edge in the final finish. And of course we cover the canopy the same way, the same way you do roof shingles. Start at the top and work your way down. You don't want to have, for instance, you don't want to have any way that spray paint can get up on the canopy. So the easiest way is start at the bottom, put the next piece on, put the next piece on. Make sure you have it sealed, otherwise you get silver paint on the canopy. You want to break that edge. You don't want to have that edge there. No, I never thought I'd see the day, but we are ready for the first coat of silver here. Really carefully detailed out that joint, radiused it all off. Back of the fillets is radiused real nice. Gotten in the fillets with the pointy tool. Just running my hand around looking for spots that might need a little more attention. And we'll get out and get some silver on this guy. One last walk around here looking for any bad spots, any spots that still need some attention. And we'll get out there and get this guy sprayed. Itching to get him sprayed. Hello! Such a nice day here, I can't believe it. This is unbelievable. A couple of days after Christmas and this is just, it must be 60 degrees out here. It's unbelievable. Stun heaven. That's what I wanted to show. I want to get around that canopy at least once or twice. Kind of seal up that little ridge that we made. Push the horns all the way up. Get down into the fillets. And what I'll try to do is get half of this sprayed, then because of the way the temperature is, I'll just put it on the ground and let it dry and then do the other half. It's just unbelievable how nice it is out here. We're right out over the edge of where we did the blend. Touching up all these little repair areas. They all look pretty decent. Well, we're closing in on getting this silver on here. And this is really good that we've taken advantage of a really good day for spraying. There isn't even a lot of breeze out here today. You use the sun to find the bad spots. I want to get up in the nose. The last thing is I'll spray in the cowling area. A little extra around the canopy and over that repair. We had that big repair out here. Now the trick here is to look in the sun for dry spots. Anywhere there's a dry spot, just pick away selectively, get a little bit extra on the dry spots. Now I'm just looking around for dry spots. Same way you candle it any other way. Let the sun hit it. Any spot you find it's dry, just give it another coat of silver. And just give this a little walk around here. Again, what I'm really looking for is dry spots. Any spot that I think I can get a little bit extra on, but I certainly don't want to put 1.5 ounces for nothing on here. That's for sure. And that is I'm happy with it. I don't know about the people out there. I'm sure Borelli's saying, sand it out again. Anyway, we'll give this some time to dry, and that's the whole deal, man. Okay, everything that's silver here is drying, and I mean, I don't know how the average person feels, but I just get a good feeling knowing this guy is in silver. And pretty much now on the next tape we'll start laying out the paint scheme. Maybe I get some help from Walt Prey, who knows. We'll start cutting out our little patterns and templates and tape, and he's a person now. He's really a nice person. I like a new girlfriend here that you're going to ask for a second date. I think he's going to work out to be a good one. And of course he's looking forward to joining our imminent family here, joining us in the quest to be immortal, or the quest to be underweight, whatever, who knows. Anyway, see you on the next video.